Hi, I feel in this beanie that I look a bit like Wee Willie Winky. Do you know who that is? Or am I showing my age slightly on here? I'm not sure. Hi, I'm a bit of an emotional bean today. Don't know why I'm a bean, but yeah, a little bit emotional today. So, just because I want to film this video and I have so many thoughts and feelings that I want to share. So please approach this video with kindness. I would appreciate that. That is not something that I think I've ever said before, but I feel like I would like to say it at the beginning of this video. Sometimes, as you know, if you've been here a while, I like to sit down and kind of, I think I call it show my working. So I want to talk about a subject and the thoughts are not particularly fully formed yet. I just would like to talk about what I have been thinking about recently, the things that have been on my mind, and something that I think is really helpful, actually, not just in the context of this, but when talking to friends or family members, is to sometimes ask, are you asking for solutions or are you just wanting to share? Because I think that can really solve miscommunication a lot of the time, or at least some of it. So in this instance, this is just me sharing. This is not me looking for answers. We are not going to dismantle the world's ableism within this video. As nice as that would be, it's not going to happen. So I just wanted to share some things that I've been thinking about recently, some things that have happened recently, and some of my concerns. Yeah, if that wasn't cryptic enough, pull up a seat, grab a cup of tea. I thought I was going to do this as a get ready with me video, actually, but I think now that I'm doing it and I've sat down and I've pressed record, I'm not sure I do want to do it as a get ready with me, because I think I really want to look at the camera and pay a lot of attention to what I'm saying. So let me quickly get ready and then I will be back with you. Okay, I'm back. I've put on a jumper because it's cold. I've already tried to film this once and there are too many things that I want to say. This is why I write books, because there are lots of words in a book and you can say lots of things. The trouble is that for everything that I think I want to say today, there are so many caveats, and some of that's knee-jerk internalized ableism. It's like, oh, this is bad, but let me tell you what's good about other areas of my life. Or there are just so many different experiences that people are going through at the moment, and I don't want to invalidate anyone's experience or hierarchy it or anything like that. That's pointless. I want to sit down and talk about my own personal experience within the context of that. But to do that, I feel like I have to contextualize everything for you. We don't have a whole week to sit here and talk about that. So I'm going to try and do that again and cherry pick a few things to speak about. You know, as if you were writing a uni essay and saying, this could be a thesis, but for the purpose of this 2,000 word essay, these are the things that we're going to focus on today. So that is what I'm going to have to do here. If this is the first video of mine that you're watching, I'm sorry, but this is probably not enough context for you, but I will link an introductory video in the description box down below. And also a couple of months ago, I filmed an updated video talking to you about my disability, which is ectrodactyly ectodermal dysplasia cleft-link syndrome. So those videos will probably help. All right, so as you know, if you've been here this past year, I've been shielding for 13.5 months now. I'm not sure if shielding is a thing outside of the UK. Every country has different rules and tiers, but in the UK, certain disabled people were sent letters from doctors saying, you are extremely clinically vulnerable against COVID, so you must not go to shops, you must not go anywhere, you must stay in your flat, or house, you must work from home. So for the past 13 and a half months, that's what I've been doing. Mr. M and I were very lucky that we were able to go stay in a cottage for a week outside of London last year. And I wanted to mention that because I feel so grateful. You know, that's a privilege that I was able to do that, because so many people haven't been able to do that. So I don't want to sit here and say I've been inside this flat for 13 and a half months and I haven't been anywhere at all. A plane. I did get to go to one place, and I feel very grateful for having been able to do that. But aside from that, I haven't been anywhere else. Going on walks outside the flat, but not been in any other buildings apart from to get my vaccine, which I have now had. I have had 2 doses of Pfizer because of being in that top category. And from tomorrow, I can resume my healthcare appointments. It was really bizarre when people were saying to me, "Are you so excited to go to bookshops?" And I was where other people's heads were at with regard to what they're looking forward to, which I do not want to invalidate or take anyone's excitement away from. And where my head has been at with what I'm looking forward to, which is accessing the healthcare I haven't been able to access as a disabled person for the past 13 months. Like, that's where I've been. Not bookshops, not shopping, not thinking about holidays, nothing. It's been, I need to help my health. That's it. That's where I've been. And that divide has been really odd. It's been very, very odd. I made a video in February last year, which was before COVID reached the UK in a big way. And looking back on that video now, I haven't watched it recently, but I vaguely remember things that I talked about. It's kind of funny to me because I remember in that video I said that I felt that there was a disconnect between who I am as a disabled person and how people see me. There's this big gap, and that's for a whole number of reasons. Some of them society's fault and some of them my own. I'm not going to victim blame myself completely, but I have definitely projected a version of myself to the world, and it's not a lie, but it's very selective. I'm very good at masking my disability, and I don't share lots of things with people. She says, sharing on the internet. I share a lot more now, and I talk more openly about disability, but for so many years of my life, I never did because I thought I wasn't supposed to. I thought it was something I wasn't supposed to go into. It would make other people uncomfortable. You just don't talk about those things. As an example, I had dozens of operations as a child. I was in and out of hospital all of the time with physio, with splints. And I never once remember having a conversation with a friend of mine at school or outside of school, at their house, at my house, about any of that. Not once in my life. And that's just not okay. Like, it's not okay. I did an event a few weeks ago with James Catchpole, who's fantastic. He's a literary agent and also an author. He's written a picture book called What Happened to You. James has one leg, and Joe in the book also has one leg, and Joe goes to the park and he wants to play, but everyone's saying, "What happened to you?" And he is like, "Well, I want to play games, you know, I want to play. Those questions are boring to me." So James and I, during that event, we were talking about how if you're a disabled kid and you don't have disabled parents, it's very different to being a disabled parent and having disabled kids, or it's very, very different, because our experience of having non-disabled parents was that our parents wanted us to be like everybody else, to present as able-bodied as possible, as non-disabled as possible. And we were saying that with love. And I want to highlight that it's from such a place of love that your parents want you to think you can do anything and you can be anyone and nothing can hold you back. And there are many positives to that. I grew up as a very confident child, but I also grew up as someone who pushed themselves to do things that were quite damaging because I thought like that's what I was rewarded for doing. And again, I'm not attributing blame to that. It's just how it was. And it's something that I've spoken to my mum about since then. You know, I said to her, we were trying to work out how many operations I'd had when I was younger. I was trying to contextualize it in my head. My first operation was when I was 3 months old, which is tiny. My first memory is an extremely traumatic one of having a gas mask forced on my face. and me screaming. And I didn't think it was a real memory for ages until I spoke to my mum about it. And she said, no, that's real. You were 18 months old. It was before an operation and you wouldn't settle. I have all of these very visceral memories from hospital. And again, I feel that I need to caveat with, and nice ones too. Hopefully, fill in the blanks, okay? There's good and there's bad, lots of shades, okay? But so many traumatic memories from hospital. And I said to my mum, what was that like for you? What do you remember? And she said, oh, you were always very happy. You were always so happy. You were always smiling. And I could hear the pride in her voice that I was the smiling child on the ward. And it's funny that she remembers it like that, because whilst, yes, happiness sometimes, but I remember smiling so hard as a child in hospital because I could see how upset everyone was, and I could see how much my physical hurt was hurting other people. So if I smiled and pretended to be okay, that would make other people feel better. And I'm sure that's something that disabled people everywhere will understand. We have that knee-jerk reaction of wanting to accommodate other people's emotions before our own, to be that strength. Again, there are positives to that. There are huge minuses to that. And in that video that I uploaded in February last year, looping back round to that, I acknowledge that because I've done that throughout my life, because I don't talk about the pain I experience very much, I don't talk about the degenerative stuff to do with my condition, my deteriorating eyesight, I don't talk about my hands falling apart. Like, there are so many things that I don't talk about because it's boring to me. I would like to escape it when I'm talking to other people, but because I don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. And that's internalized ableism, it's society's ableism. And I think there's always a part of your brain that thinks that, oh, well, people don't have the whole picture. And if they did, they would understand. And that's a bit of a comfort blanket. If you throw COVID into that and suddenly that mask is taken away from you. Obviously, people knew that I had a health condition, and my husband knows the ins and outs of my condition. But I don't think I had realized how great that gap was in people's understanding of my disability. But COVID made people acutely aware of that, because I was labeled as a clinically extremely vulnerable person with shielding. And I could see some people saying, well, why? Because don't you just have missing fingers? Is that not what you have? Because that's the thing that people see. And you see it more in real life. I get lots of comments from people saying, I never noticed your hands, which is not a compliment, by the way, but it's the framing of the video. If you were interacting with me in real life, if you saw me out and about and you saw my hands, you would notice more probably than if I was just talking to you online. But yeah, COVID removed that gap. And people and myself were confronted with my, I'm going to use inverted commas here, vulnerability, which, as I said, is a privilege, because many disabled people didn't have that masking or ability to mask before COVID because of the specifics of their own condition. And that comfort blanket of thinking, well, if people did understand my condition better and knew all the ins and outs of it, they would interact with me in a different way, but a nice way. You know, it would be, oh, I understand that. Okay, let's bond over that. That was disintegrated. That completely disappeared. For a few people, that was true, but for others, it made the gap much bigger. It exposed something they really weren't comfortable with. It made them look at me in a different way, and they didn't like it. And some of these people were very close to me and important people, and seeing that reaction has been horrible. These are difficult subjects, and I understand it might make some people uncomfortable initially as they process a health condition of a loved one. But once that time has passed, and if they've processed and they're still saying horribly ableist things, and I don't even know how to end that sentence. I can't really explain a lot of the things that have happened this past year, but I'm sure that disabled people watching and others as well will have noticed that true colours of lots of people, you've seen them this past year when we've had to protect people in society, when it's been about doing the greater good, and some people have not done that. It's been extremely eye-opening and horrible. Over 60% of COVID deaths in the UK have been disabled people. And I think a lot of animosity towards disabled people, which I myself have seen and witnessed, and so have many of my friends, is because our disability is a representation of what they see as unwell. It's a reminder of the pandemic. And I get that lots of people are angry and upset, and our mental health is... But a lot of people have taken their anger out on disabled people as like, well, this is your fault. We're having to change all of our lives because of you. And I don't want to do that. I have figures. Online disability hate crime this past year rose 46%. I know that disabled women are 3 times as likely to experience sexual assault. And that's got nothing to do with the pandemic. That's just facts. Yeah, it has exposed everybody, I think, for many different reasons. And a lot of that has been very painful. And I really don't want this to come across as a woe is me thing. I'm just saying this is my personal experience. There are so many experiences like this from other disabled people. And if this is not something that is in your sphere of, things that you're seeing in your life because you happen to not be disabled, I just want you to sit with it for a bit. That's all. And as I said, I'm not looking for answers or fixes or anything. This is just the reality right now. Wheelchair access for wheelchair users has been so much diminished. Supermarkets, often they have the disabled parking right outside, but because they've been having queues outside, they've blocked off the disabled parking. The same in London for disabled parking and pavements, especially in the centre of town, setting up outside restaurants and food areas for people to eat. You can't get a wheelchair to them or past them. There is no access. Deaf people, many deaf friends of mine have been struggling because if they go to healthcare appointments, you're not allowed anybody in with you right now, which is understandable, but everyone is wearing masks. And if you don't sign, then what are deaf people supposed to do? Everyone is wearing a mask and lots of people refuse to write things down and aid in communication. It's so frustrating. There's such a general animosity towards disability, and that's something that I've been thinking about now that I am going to be getting on a tube every week to go to hospital appointments. I used to get a lot of abuse on the tube anyway, and that's something that I have been sheltered from this past year because I've been inside, though I am still a disabled person putting out content online, so I do get abusive comments every single day, which I won't list here, but I delete them, so I still see them. I think a lot of the time, if you're not exposed to abuse like that, it's very easy to kid ourselves into thinking that the world is a much nicer place than it is, or that the people who are saying these horrible things are just trolls. And I suppose it depends on your definition of troll, but that's definitely not always the case. Plus, I experience people being awful in real life to do with disfigurement and disability. So it's not just people hiding behind a computer screen. It's much more complex than that. And because I'm aware that in general people are more aware of other people's appearance, looking out for illness and things that are deemed to be contagious, and often disability is associated with those things, that worries me. That's something that I've been thinking a lot about. It's something that I've had to think about so that I'm armed with that thought for when I go out into the world and do sit on the tube. As an example, when I went to go and get my second vaccine a couple of weeks ago, 2 people behind me in the queue, first of all, were complaining because they noticed that I was quite young and they thought I must have stolen somebody's appointment because I was young. Then when I handed over my piece of paper that had my first vaccine written on the top so they could fill it out again, they noticed my hands. And then they started getting cross. They were saying, well, what does she have? Does she have leprosy? Does she have gout? Is it something contagious? Is it safe for us to be here if she is here too? And I didn't respond to these things because they weren't speaking directly to me. And we have to pick our battles. If we responded every time, it would take over your mind. And it's not my responsibility to do that either. I don't have to defend myself to that. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to expose my vulnerabilities in order to justify my being there. So I didn't say anything. And when I got to the front of the queue, they needed to take my temperature to go inside. They had a thermometer gun, so I raised my hat so that they could do it, but it wasn't working. And the guy said, could you just take off your hat so that I could read it? And I wasn't wearing a wig or anything. I was like, okay. So I took off my hat, and then the people behind me gasped and they were like, oh no, she's got cancer. She's got cancer. I feel so bad that I thought she'd stolen an appointment. We'll pray for you. And that was just like an example on a plate of what I'm talking about, of people wanting to know the ins and outs of your bodies and judging them, not just in general, but also with regard to this global pandemic that we're in. And that's a lot of weight to carry around, and it's just not very pleasant. I know that some friends of mine who have facial disfigurements have felt a little bit of a reprieve because wearing a mask has meant that they're actually getting less abuse than they would normally because it's covered. Though Robert Hose, who's written a book called Ugly, and I will link his TED talk in the description box down below because he's amazing, was saying actually that it meant that it was making the sales of his book suffer because it wasn't very good advertising if he was going around wearing a mask. Oh, I know that everyone's emotions are on edge at the moment. I know that people are scared, and I know that there are reasons that people behave in certain ways, but it doesn't lessen the impact on me or any other disabled person who happens to be at the end of whatever that person is experiencing that day. I always try and contextualize an interaction with, well, okay, what are they going through? Like, clearly they're having a bad day, but that's not always the case. As I said, some people are having bad days and they may have said something they didn't intend to, but some people just aren't nice. And that's really horrible to sit with. And I know that in filming a video like this, there are going to be people sitting there thinking that I'm complaining, and if I complained less, then people would like disabled people more, which is a comment that I had when I was talking about the film The Witches. It's so difficult when I sit down and want to talk about one specific thing to do with disability, because I want to say, well, this isn't great, but I have joy in my life in this respect. And like last week when I filmed the video about my new wigs, I wanted to say this is disability joy, but also, you know, just a pause for the moment that this has come out of something very difficult. It's all so complex. I am not just someone who wants to sit down and moan. It feels like I'm moaning, but I also know that that's internalized ableism. I'm supposed to shut up and keep quiet and pretend that everything's fine, but it hasn't been fine. I'm going to wrap this up because I think I have spoken a lot and I don't really know how to wrap it up, but that's just what I've been reflecting on recently, is the hurt of people who haven't made space for disability, who have been very vocal in their dismissiveness, that's not a word, in their dismissal of disabled people this past year, and not just the wider context of disabled people as this group of people that they don't interact with or know, but the direct impact on disabled people that they do know. That has been, as I said, the most hurtful and the most difficult to reconcile with. And please keep in mind kindness of people who look different. I mean, it seems like such an obvious thing to say, but I feel like it needs saying. As I said, disability hate crime is up 46% online, and it has risen in person too. And I'm sure as more disabled people are able to go out more, if access allows, when talking about wheelchair users, if you notice access that has been blocked off for wheelchair users in establishments, please do question it. I'm sure that will rise too. And it's not something that I want to rise if it's not something that you have been thinking about recently. I just wanted to present that to you. And thank you for sticking around and listening to me discuss disability more. I know that I do a lot more advocating than I used to do, and it's something that's extremely important to me. And I'm grateful for those of you who also watch those videos as well as my bookish ones. I'm going to stop talking now, and I will speak to you all very soon. I'm sending lots of love.